Well, time to prepare for the apocalypse, as only a bookworm can. Welcome back to the Bookshelf Odyssey. My name is Art. Today, I want to tell you of 12 books that I would grab in the event of the apocalypse. I got this idea from the channel Book Time with Elvis, and he was watching the news of the weekend involving, among other things, President Zelensky's visit to the White House and the whole debacle that came from that. And he, and I think many of us have started wondering, what would it look like for World War III to happen? And again, I'm going to not get too political in this video. I know politics can be a very touchy subject, and I'm sure I have followers from a wide range. And as I've always said before, no matter what your view is, you're welcome here, as long as we can be kind to one another. That's got to be the base we start with. But in his video, Mark talked about what books would he grab in the event of an apocalypse. So, he's got to run down to his bunker, take Elvis with him, and what books would he grab? And I thought that was such an interesting idea. I'm going to shamelessly steal it from him. Although in his video he said others could do this as well. He'd be interested in that. But Mark had some requirements for him and what books he would grab. I'm going to share what my requirements were as I thought about this. So mine are a little different from his, but one is obviously I have to own the book already. Secondly, I would want to grab some that would be entertaining because, Pumpkin and I might have to stay in a bunker for a while. But then also books that would be helpful in rebuilding society after the apocalypse was done. So those were kind of my thoughts going into making a list. Now, there will be some books I would have put on this list, but I don't own them. Another thing about this list, I was ashamed to see, there's not a lot of diversity in its authors. In fact, as I started listing them, it was mostly men. And then I thought, I better think about women writers as well. And then I thought, I don't really have a lot of people of color in this as either, which, I think points to me, I need to be making better efforts to read more diversely. But since the apocalypse alarm just went off, I don't actually have time to run to the Barnes and Noble and look around for other books. So my list has some flaws to it. Let's go ahead and jump in, and I'm just gonna go in the order that these books came to mind. So not necessarily from favorite to, from best to worst kind of thing. It's just, this is the order they appeared in my mind. The first two immediately came to mind. Like, if I could only have time to even grab two books, it would be these two books. And that was Fahrenheit 451 and The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. Now, it just so happens those are also two of my favorite books. They are definitely on the top 5. But I think they would be very helpful books to grab in the event of an apocalypse. Fahrenheit 451 is fairly obvious. It's a book that speaks about a society in the future that banned and burns books, that limits creative thought, that has government-controlled media, that has grown their society to be vapid and unable to think deeply. And it's a powerful story of Guy Montag, who is a fireman who, in this case, doesn't put out fires, but starts fires. He and his team, they burn books. That's what they're called to do. And what happens when he begins to read stories and hide books. It's a powerful story that I think serves a lot of warning for us as a society, and how after an apocalypse, we can start doing better by reading Bradbury and seeing what the warning signs he saw when he wrote the book, I believe back in the 50s or maybe 60s. And then for The Martian Chronicles, that is a collection of short stories that he stitched together into a novel that tells the ongoing story of the colonization of Mars. The reason I would grab that one is mostly for the last story. I believe it's called like the 1,000-Year Picnic or something. And that ending story shows mankind, the few survivors of mankind, getting to begin anew and getting to start over, because there was an apocalypse. There was a giant nuclear war on Earth, and it wiped out everything, and they get to begin again. Does mankind deserve to start over? Well, we could debate that, but it just leaves you with a little bit of hope and wonder as to what could come next from a society rebuilding on a new planet, with new people, hopefully learning the mistakes of the past. So I would definitely add the Martian Chronicles to it. And then my third choice, and this is a little bit cheating from my own requirements, and so I need to buy this pretty quick. It's a collection of Star Trek, the original series, short stories. I guess they're like novelizations. I forget who the author is. Was it James Blish? But he wrote short stories based on the scripts of the original TV show. I picked the original Star Trek. It's not even my favorite series, but I picked that because that was a series that gave mankind hope for the future. You saw a diverse crew in the future working together in harmony and peace. You had, the American James Kirk, captain of the Enterprise. And then you had Spock, who was half Vulcan, half human, and his internal struggle with those two natures. But then you also had Lieutenant Uhura, who, as a woman of color, having a powerful presence on board, as well as Sulu, the navigator, or whatever he did there. And then you had Chekhov, who was a Russian, who was not the enemy. He was a co-worker, a explorer with the crew of the Enterprise. And there was peace among those nations. And I'm imagining that coming out in a time of the Cold War, and to show a Russian character not be evil or anything like that. It must have been a very powerful representation. Some of the episodes would challenge you to think through things like racism and genocide, things like that, along with capturing what science fiction does best, and that is the sense of wonder and exploration. So yeah, I would definitely recommend those. I believe you can get it in, they've been condensed, or they've been collected in 3 volumes. I'm not sure, so this might really be breaking my own rules, but it's my channel. I can do what I want, right? Speaking of short stories, then my next thought went to, I would grab a massive collection of Ray Bradbury short stories. I have 2 or 3 that contain about 100 short stories each in them. And mostly I would do that just to give me something fun to read and something entertaining. But also a lot of his short stories carry some of the powerful themes and lessons you can learn from some of his other books. Admittedly, my list skews heavily towards Bradbury, but again, I'm only able to operate with what I have on my shelf. So, technically. Okay, so that's that. The next thought that came was Jane Austen. Now, my favorite Jane Austen is Emma. So it would really be a toss-up between Emma and Pride and Prejudice. I would probably lean actually towards, I can't even decide now, but it would be either one of the two. The reason why I even bring up Pride and Prejudice is because it was either during World War I or World War II, possibly both, soldiers out in the trenches, Pride and Prejudice was one of the books that they requested and received. And there's, I know from World War II, there's these editions made that were more like oblong, like like a rectangle, and so made differently, and that way they could stick them in their pockets easier and things like that. And they would read, British soldiers would read Pride and Prejudice and Jane Austen as a way to remind themselves of home. And I thought, if this book was good enough for World War I and World War II, why not World War III? Hey, world, that's not a challenge here, okay? But I figure if that was a book that meant something to carried soldiers through 2 world wars, we might as well add it for the 3rd one. Plus, I can't imagine living without being able to read Jane Austen. Especially any of her books. Just about any of her books anyway. But yeah, I would definitely grab one of those too. Maybe if I left out some food, I'd have some room for a 13th or 14th book. Well, we might have to think about that. Okay. So that would be one, just because what this would do to help during an apocalypse is a reminder of gentler times, a reminder of home, a reminder of the joy of community, of love, of what it looks like for men. Anyway, this is what I see in books like Emma, and in some ways Pride and Prejudice as well. What does it look like to be a gentleman? And not like the social standing kind of gentleman, but as I always like to emphasize, a gentle man. I think there's a lot of worth in thinking about that. How can I be gentle? How can I be kind? How can I do what's right? And I think men like Mr. Knightley, and even to some extent Mr. Darcy, though he's a little rough and can be seen as kind of gloomy and Byron-y in his appearance, but what he does for Lizzie and her family later on in the book, I think is remarkable and makes him very much a gentleman, capable of great kindness. So that one of those 2 books, man, I might just have to take both. I made rules and now I'm already disobeying them. Welcome to my channel, I guess. And then that got me thinking, I needed a book that would make me laugh. I would grab my collection of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy trilogy. It contains all 5 novels in the trilogy. And yes, you heard me right. And I've read that so many times, it's really starting to fall apart. But every time I read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, any book in the series, I laugh. Douglas Adams had such a humorous outlook on the world that it's going to be something we need during an apocalypse, is to laugh. So I would definitely grab that. If you're new to that book, basically what happens is there's an apocalypse. Arthur Dent, an Englishman, what he thinks is he's the sole survivor of the destruction of planet Earth. He manages to escape through a friend of his named Ford Prefect, who is actually an alien he didn't realize. And they hitch a ride on board the a Vogon constructor fleet. And the story just picks up from there. It is fantastically hilarious. I would compare that with like Terry Pratchett's Discworld series. You get kind of the same vibe. Terry might actually be maybe just a little bit more literary in his prose, but Douglas Adams is hilarious. But then when you actually think about some of the jokes he makes, you realize there's a lot of deep social commentary happening there as well. It might not always be as obvious, but it invites you to think about it. So great satire, great humor, and I think it's going to be something we need. That, of course, then led me to think about grabbing a favorite author, something for entertainment value, and how much I love mysteries. So I would grab Bury Your Dead by Louise Penny. It's book 6 in the Three Pines series, and so far it's my favorite one, ? Because there's a few others that have moments that I've really enjoyed. Where that book takes place in the series is that the previous book, The Brutal Telling, there was Chief Inspector Gamache solves a crime. He solves crime, he solves murders and all that, and the person arrested for that crime was a shocking revelation. That's all I'll say. And book 6 follows up on that, and Gamache is now takes place months later, and along with that, something has happened to Gamache in the meantime, something very tragic, and he's carrying injuries, and we don't know what happened. In fact, both my wife and I, when we first read it, we thought, did we miss a book here? It jumps ahead, but then as you start reading it, it goes back and shows you bits and pieces of the story, and so you get a picture of what happened. And then this book changes the direction of the series a little bit, for at least for a while, and it's such a wonderful and powerful storyline that follows. But this book really just stands out to me as a fantastic, remarkable book in the series, and I would grab that one, I think, just because of the power in Penny's writing. Just about any one of her books I've read, I've thoroughly enjoyed. She is one that hits, I think there's maybe only one in the series I haven't given 5 stars. And that's incredible. She's an incredible writer. And so I would definitely grab that book. Really, any of them would be fine, but that's the one I would try to grab specifically. What I love about Gamache is that not only are the stories entertaining, but Inspector Gamache will do what's right, even if it's hard. And that's, I think, a character we need to carry into a new society after the apocalypse, right? We need to have these heroes, these models of people that will do what's right, even if it risks their own safety or their own prestige or their own position. You can count on Inspector Gamache doing what's right. Some might say, well, that makes for a very boring character if he always does what's right. But think about that, because sometimes the truth is inconvenient at best, and sometimes the truth hurts. And sometimes doing what's right means you are at risk. And sometimes doing what's right might look an awful lot like doing what's wrong. And there are times in the series that he maybe takes a little bit of a gamble, and he really struggles with that. And I love that he is also a man of compassion and gentleness, but he's also firm in what he must do if that's what's right. But yet he also shows grace and at times mercy. Just a remarkably complex character. I love Inspector Gamache. He's probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite, literary character. Excellent series. So yeah, I'd grab Bury Your Dead or some other book by Louise Penny. And then I got back to thinking about classics and books that I would read for entertainment. So next I would grab Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell, only because I haven't read it yet. And if I'm going to be locked away in a bunker for a while, I want to have at least a book I know I haven't read. I don't know what I would do if the book turned out to be really boring, but maybe burn the paper for fire, for heat. I don't know. Okay, just kidding. I will not burn a book. But yeah, I would want to grab a book I haven't read yet, so I'd grab Wives and Daughters. I'll actually be reading that in April. So, if the apocalypse can happen in the next couple of weeks, that would be great. Okay, no, not really. Okay. But yeah, I would grab something by Gaskell, but I might as well grab Wives and Daughters since I haven't read that yet. Which then, of course, I thought about Dickens. Would I bring a Dickens? Yes. Could I just grab the whole shelf of Dickens novels and bring those instead? Well, yes, but I want to try to be thoughtful in what I'm grabbing in my imaginary apocalypse here. So I would definitely grab A Christmas Carol. That's not only my favorite book, in my favorite book of his, but I think it's a book that has a message that, again, our society today still needs, but any new society we have needs to heed the lesson of A Christmas Carol and learn from your past mistakes and change. And as long as you are alive and breathing in air, you have a chance to change, as well as you have a chance to enable change and help those in need. I think that would be a very powerful message delivered in a wonderful story that would be especially lovely at Christmas during the apocalypse. But I wanted to grab a Dickens novel as well, not just because they're chunkers and it would give me something to read for a while, but I went back and forth on what book I could bring. I was going to pick Little Dorrit, but I think I'm just now thinking I might even change my mind on that. And I'll pick the Pickwick Papers, because again, that's funny, excellent writing, great characters, plus it's very episodic. So, you know, at night as we huddle down in our bunkers or shelters, I can imagine maybe starting a fire, and whoever survived and left over can gather around the fire, and I could read from each chapter from a Pickwick Papers every night or something. You know, that's what I'm thinking. So maybe that book would be helpful. There are certainly others you could grab for that, but I think that's what I would go with. I kind of jumped back and forth here between a modern and a classic again. So the next one would be The Violin Conspiracy by Brendan Slocum. And that tells the story of a young black man named Ray McMillian. And he is a gifted violinist. And he's entering this contest, a music contest. It's globally recognized as being one of the hardest, most difficult, prestigious contests there are. And it tells the story of him becoming a musician and some of the challenges he faces as a black musician. And one of the main plots of the story is that this violin he uses, I think it's from like his grandfather or great grandfather, something like that, and who had received it as a gift. And now the white family, who originally years and years ago gave this violin as a gift to Ray's distant relative, is now claiming ownership of that violin and wanting it back before he has a chance to compete in the Tchaikovsky competition, is what it's called. So it is a good story with a powerful message, and I would recommend his books, as well as Symphony of Secrets by Brendan Slocum. It's another book, kind of some of the similar lessons there, but another powerful story. But I would recommend this book not just because it's an entertaining read, but also because of what it says about racism and what it says about the challenges people go through when they are not in the majority. And how can we do better at that? And I think this book would also then help teach a future society, let's do better. Let's make changes. If we're going to start anew here, we need to do better. So I'd recommend that book. And that got me then thinking and realizing, my list of books is not very diverse, unfortunately. And that caused me to go down a spiral of existential dread of how come I don't read as widely as I should, and what can I do to change that? So the last book, I had 11, and so then I was just desperately thinking, oh no, the bombs are falling, I gotta go. What book am I gonna grab? So I'm just gonna grab The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. She's my favorite Bronte. I love that story. It's powerful. It's well written. It's an exciting read, but it also has something to say about the treatment of women, and it speaks out against what we now realize is toxic masculinity. And I think it would again be helpful for a new society to read this story and see how can we do better. How can we make sure those who might not have a voice and have a way of escape if they need it and are protected. That's a lot of what that story revolves around. At least that's how I interpret it. So so a great book, a very thoughtful book, but also once I get about halfway through that book, the story really picks up and I just can't put it down. It's a thrilling story. All right, so those are the 12 or so books I would rescue in the event of an apocalypse. If you want to do that as well, I would love to hear your take on this. I might tag some people in the show notes, and don't feel like you have to if that's not your thing. But really, anyone watching this, I would love to know what you think. So those are my books I would grab. Also, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and make sure you like and subscribe and hit the notification bell, all those things. We are stuck at about 850 right now, followers of this channel. Let's get that bumped up here. Okay. Let's try to at least hit, 10 million by the end of the week. How's that? All right. Perfect. So that'll be it for me today. I've got to get down into the bunker to start reading, I guess. And so until next time, happy reading and take care.